Good day everyone, my name is Julian Picoliano and I'm going to discuss about the learners with difficulty seeing. Students in the classroom will exhibit different levels of clarity of eyesight or visual acuity. So what does it mean, visual acuity? Visual acuity corresponds to the eye's ability to understand the shapes and details of objects. And it's just one factor of vision alongside color vision and deep perception. A visual acuity test is one kind of exam that discerns how well an individual can see the details of letters or objects from a given distance. And they are typically conducted by nurses, optometrists, ophthalmologists, or technicians. Individuals will be given this test if they are experiencing visual problems or just to check in. One kind of test is known as the Snellen test, which utilizes a chart of symbols or letters. The letters or symbols are arranged in rows and columns and have different sizes which are viewed from roughly 14 to 20 feet away. The individual is told to sit or stand at a distance and to cover one eye while reading out the letters or symbols, with the open eye, repeating the same process for the other eye. The letters and symbols will gradually become smaller until the individual is unable to read them. Visual acuity is best understood as a fraction, such as 20 over 20. This means that the visual acuity at a distance of 20 feet from the object is seen as normal. For 20 over 40 vision, the person would need to be 20 feet away from the object, when other individuals could be 40 feet in order to see it. If someone's visual acuity is not 20 over 20, they may require eyeglasses to correct their vision. Therefore, there are those who can see even in the farthest distance, and there are also those who can't see even if it is only close. There may be some students with hampered restricted vision. So what is this hampered restricted vision? A hampered restricted vision means that you may be unable to see the entire view from the specified area. So who are those learners with difficulty seeing? Learners with difficulty seeing are those with issues regarding sight that interfere with academics. Due to the blurring of their vision, they do not understand more about what is written in the book and on the blackboard, which is why it affects their learning. The Individual with Disabilities Education Act, or also known as IDEA, states that an impairment in vision that even with correction adversely affects a child's educational performance, which includes both partial sight and blindness. It is really hard to learn if you can't read what is written, especially if you can see it. Visual impairment is a term experts use to describe any kind of vision loss, whether it is someone who cannot see at all or someone who has partial vision loss. So what it is partial vision loss? Partial vision loss is a person experiences vision loss with dark, partial, or blurry vision. Some forms of vision loss are temporary, while others are irreversible. Some people are completely blind, but many others have what it is called legal blindness. If you are legally blind, your vision is 20 over 200, or less in your better eye, or your field of vision is less than 20 degrees. That means, if an object is 200 feet away, you have to stand 20 feet from it in order to see it clearly. But a person with normal vision can stand 200 feet away and see that object perfectly. A vision impairment refers to when you lose part or all of your ability to see or vision. The impairment must persist even with the use of eyeglasses, contact lenses, medication, or surgery. Visual impairment which is severe enough to interfere with progress in normal educational programs is considered a visual handicap. So visual handicap is a disability that prevents from seeing well. As what I have said, the students may need to have their eyesight corrected by wearing glasses or other optical devices. And that would be all. And I'm going to give the virtual floor to the next reporter.
Good day everyone, I am Maria Leslie Baloran. At this point, I will discuss on how we identify the students or the learners that have difficulty in seeing. So, now let us identify. Learners with difficulty in seeing often have physical signs such as crossed eyes, squinting, and eyes that turn outwards. They may also be clumsy, usually bumping into objects, which causes them to fall down. They like to sit near the instructional materials, or times would stand up and go near the visual aid. Now, we can identify the learners with difficulty in seeing through their physical signs that I mentioned earlier. So, in this kind of problem, the teacher need to do is to have a seating accommodation, to have the learners to see the writings in a whiteboard or the visual aids. Most of these learners are need someone to assist, for example, in when they will take notes every time when they go in classes. So, the next identification is learners with difficulty seeing may also show poor eye-hand coordination. This can be seen in their handwriting or poor performance in sporting activities. Another indication is poor academic performance, as the students might have difficulty reading as well as writing. So, it is not easy to have a difficulty in seeing because when it comes to the performance, it encounter a lot of challenges. It also have an inability to see an object at a distance or to read the writings in the visual aids. Usually, this kind of learners sit in front to easily understand and see the writings of the instructional materials for their teachers. Now I am done discussing identification. Let us proceed to the another reporter to discuss our next topic, which is learning characteristics. Thank you.
Good day, I am Natalie Gagampang, the next reporter. So for today, I will going to discuss about learning characteristics. So, good visual ability is critical in learning. Most school lessons are done through blackboard writing, presentations, or handouts in most major subjects. So, visual impairments. So, the term visual impairments refers to a broad range of conditions that impair eyesight. Instead of referring to eye defects, we use the word to describe mild to severe vision loss. So, it affects the student's ability to participate in normal classroom activities. In the past, students who are visually impaired are placed in special institutions. So nowadays, most are enrolled with other children who are not visually impaired. If the correct assistance and modifications are provided, a student with a visual problem can excel in the classroom. So, if a student with a visual impairment is enrolled in our class, as a future educator or teacher, we should keep in mind that visual impairment is included in learning. Included in learning. So, we educators frequently speak of children with visual impairments in terms of classroom functioning. To underline the legal and medical clarification may be less important than what the students can do in the classroom. The three standard educational clarification of vision impairment are moderate, severe, and profound. The degree to which a student needs special education modifications in order to learn is indicated by these clarifications. Learners with difficulty seeing have restricted ways to learn incidentally from their surroundings, since most of them learn through visual glosses. Because of this, the other senses are used to acquire knowledge. Due to the limited ability to explore the environment, low motivation to discover is present. So I believe that visual ability plays an important role to us. students, especially in learning. So, through our senses of sight, we can see what has been during our classes. So, but having visual impairment would hinder the students to cope up with learning. Some students who have a visual impairment use eyeglasses for them to be able to see clearly and for them to cope with learning. In an educational setting, no questions that being able to concentrate is key to succeeding in school. However, because students with vision problems find it hard to read text that is small or far away, they can find it hard to focus on schoolwork, and ultimately, poor visions can negatively affect a student's ability to learn and grow. So that's all for my report about learning characteristics. Thank you.
So, good day everyone. I am Regine Donghit and I am going to discuss the general education adaptations. So, modification in teaching is needed to accommodate students with difficulty seeing. The following strategies may be considered. 1. If the use of books is part of your lessons, students with difficulty seeing should be informed ahead of time so that they can be ordered in braille or in an audio recorded format. Second, portions of textbooks and other printed materials may be recorded so that visually impaired students can listen instead of focusing on the visual presentation. The third, all words written on the board should be read clearly. Fourth, students with difficulty seeing should be seated near the board so that they can easily move close to the instructional materials used during the lesson. The fifth, a body can be assigned to a student with difficulty seeing as needed. And the sixth, students with difficulty seeing might need more time to complete a task or homework. 7. Teachers should be aware of terminology that would require visual acuity which the impaired student may not possess. And lastly, teachers should monitor the students closely to know who needs extra time in completing the tasks.
Good day. Thank you, Ms. Regine. I hope everyone would remember what she said, for it is very important. And now, I am the one who will going to continue discussing and give you some further information about our topic. So, the educational definition of visual impairment, it is emphasize the functional visual efficiency. Because visual efficiency is unique to each learner. The way the learner uses the residual vision is the main concern of the educator. Visual impairment occurs when the peripheral field of vision is reduced. So we all know that vision plays a critical role in educational setting, but not only in educational setting, but also in our life. Visual impairment which is severe enough to interfere with progress in normal educational programs is considered as visual handicap. Therefore, students must be able to see clearly, focus on objects far and near, be able to coordinate hand and eye, discriminate small differences, and remember what they see. Because if any have difficulty of these areas may pose problems in the classroom. So to summarize, an educational description of visual impairment may include the following. So the first one is the totally blind or severe impairment, which means the individual receives no useful information through the sense of vision. Meaning to say, they cannot see anything or even lights. That is why they must use tactile and auditory senses for learning. Because through this, they can access information easily. So the second one is the functionally blind, which means learners learn mostly through the other sense, but may be able to use vision to supplement information received from the other senses, like touch. So wherein in this functionally blind, they would need to use Braille to learn to read. Wherein Braille, it consists of arrangement of dots, which make up of alphabets, numbers, or even punctuation marks. It would help people with vision impairment to be able to know how to read and write even when they have disability. So the third one is the low vision learners, mild to moderate impairment. So it is primarily use vision as a means of learning and with magnifying devices. They may also learn to use print materials. So the fourth one is the visual efficiency. It is refers how well a person uses whatever vision present. This includes the ability to control eye movements, to discriminate objects from their background, and to pay attention to impairment materials. In conclusion, for children or students with visual impairment to maximally benefit from inclusive education programs, there is a need for a formal and clinical assessment of vision. So in our society, most of the communities use the Snellen E and N charts as an assessment tool because the purpose of it is to determine the nature and what type and degree of disability inherent in each individual with visual impairment. So this will enable the class teacher and the specialist make provisions for them in terms of materials and their support services. And I think that would be all with my topic. And the next reporter is Ms. Cobero.
Good day everyone, I am Judan Cobero and I'm going to discuss about the impact of having a visual impairment. So, when a visual impairment is present from birth, which we can call a congenital, it will have a more significant impact on development and learning that if the visual is acquired later in life. So, loss of vision can affect all areas of development. And one of those development is social development. So, social development is affected as children are not able to pick up on non-verbal clues, or if they are unable to make eye contact, they may appear disinterested and can reduce sustained social interactions with other children. So loss of vision also impact the motor development, as a child may not be motivated to move toward which can be seen, or causes inhibition to move or for fear of the unknown. So they are afraid to move something or to do some motor actions because they may have some they may fear something to happen to them. So exploration of the environment and materials is critical in cognitive development. Therefore, movement is important not only for motor development but for the development of concepts. So language acquisition can also be affected by the loss of vision as active interaction within the people around the child. And the environment is important in language development. Delays, means that the environment also have it impact on the language development of the child. So delays in the area of independence in activities of daily living are impacted as incidental learning.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are now on to the last part of our discussion, and that would be all about tactile graphics. If we talk about assistive devices for children who are visually impaired, what usually comes to mind is Braille. If you remember, Braille use a raised dots to represent a certain character. So letter A has its specific representation of dots, letter B, C, D, and so on. Visually impaired children use Braille to read and write. Let's say, how would we represent a horse? How would we represent or how would we describe what Plato or Aristotle or Isaac Newton to a visually impaired child? Or how would we describe the very popular Mona Lisa painting of Leonardo da Vinci? That's where a tactile graphics comes in. By definition, these are images that use raised surfaces so that a visually impaired person can feel them. Since they are robbed of the capability to see, the next thing that they would do in order to be able to know what a certain thing looks like is to feel them or touch them. That is the very use of tactile graphics. For example, this is a flat surface and then there is a dot representation of a horse. And once touched by a blind person or a blind child, he or she would already know what it looks like, and it would be stored into his or her mind that once he or she touch it again, excuse me, he or she would already know that it is a horse. That is the power of tactile graphics. People with a vision impairment are finding tactile graphics extremely valuable and in some cases vital for successful study, work, and leisure. While people with a vision impairment are routinely provided with text transcribed into braille, audio, or large print, the pictures, the diagrams, and maps which accompany text are often omitted or only briefly described. In conclusion, there are sometimes that words will never be enough to describe a certain thing, just like diagrams and maps. They need to be touched or to feel in order for a visually impaired child to know what it really looks like. Now, tactile graphics are useful when number one, the user is print impaired but has some tactile ability. It means that child is adept in knowing what he or she feels like while touching the surface. A concept not easily described in words. A friend asked me, this happened months ago, how would you describe the ocean to a blind person? Again, as I've said before, there are some things that words will never be enough to describe. And my answer was, I would bring that person, that blind friend, to the ocean, let him or her touch the sand, let him or her feel the breeze, let him or her heard the swooshing and the splashing of the waves, and that is how I would describe an ocean to a blind person. I hope I am understood. Third is a real object is unavailable for touching, so as a substitute, of course, since it is really easy to acquire. The shape, form, or pattern is significant. Fifth, it is necessary to illustrate scale and explain maps, technology, or biological relationships. Tactile graphics are not, however, exact replicas of the original, nor are they good for fine detail and representing very large graphics. As I've said, it is not perfect, but it is really helpful. And that's the end of my report, and I hope you've learned something about the importance of tactile graphics to a blind person or to a visually impaired child.